Even So is Lauren's ninth book and was published just last month. Lauren's books explore themes of passion, compassion, addiction, depression, redemption, and so much more. In one interview, Lauren explained that writing is how she makes sense of the world and that she writes about what obsesses and bothers her. Along the way to making sense of the world, she has created compelling works of fiction that have touched her readers and have even changed lives. Lauren states that some people stop drinking because of reading her novel, The Empty Room, which is described as a searing, raw, and powerful portrayal of the chaos and pain of alcoholism. The Empty Room was named one of the best books of the year by the National Post and the Winnipeg Free Press. My first reading experience with Lauren B. Davis was the book Our Daily Bread, long listed for the Scotiabank Giller Prize. It and Lauren's writing has been praised by Jane Urquhart as follows. Lauren B. Davis's vivid prose and empathetically developed characters will remain in the reader's mind long after the final chapter has been read. I feel that this is also true of Even So. I'm sure that after hearing from Lauren tonight, that you'll want to check out some of her other titles, such as The Stubborn Season, The Radiant City, The Grimoire of Kensington Market, and Against a Darkening Sky. Lauren is a well-respected creative writing teacher who has taught in Geneva, Paris, Ireland, Canada, and the US, and she is a past mentor with the Humber College Creative Writing by Correspondence program. Born in Montreal, Lauren now lives in Princeton with her husband and their rescue pup, Bailey. I know you'll want to check out Lauren's website, laurenbdavis.com, to find out more about her work and also to see a photo of Lauren with Bailey. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Excuse me, it's lovely to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here. So I'm just going to launch into my first question.
Please.
In the epigraph of Even So, there is a Raymond Carver poem entitled Late Fragment. Can you share the significance of this poem to your novel?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite poems, and interestingly enough, it's what's on his tombstone. He wanted it put in it. So I'll just make sure I get it right, because I've quoted this before and then I realized I got it wrong. So the entire poem is, "And did you get what you wanted from this life? Even so, I did. And what did you want? To call myself beloved, to feel myself beloved on the earth." And I think it's that, it's that last line, the last words in the first line, "even so," that of course is the title of the novel, because none of us get what we want, right? Or if we get what we want, it turns out to be not quite what we thought it was going to be. Publishing is kind of like that. And, we all have these dreams of what we think is going to make us whole, is going to fill up that hole inside. And, so often when we get that thing, either we don't get it and we get by, or we get that thing and it's not what we hoped for. And it's only in that we find this next level. And what did you want? To know myself beloved, to feel myself beloved on the earth. It's that kernel of truth, so succinctly put by a great writer, that has haunted me ever since I read it. And it came to me after I wrote the book, that I thought, oh my gosh, I think that's, not only do I think that's the title, I think that's the epigraph of the book, because it seems to speak to each of the characters in the novel.
Great, thank you. I think you were referring to your novel, Our Daily Bread, when you spoke about seeing neighbors as the other, or
the other,
those people. And we are living in very polarizing times. And it strikes me that the setting of this novel also highlights the other. I'm thinking, amongst other things, of Princeton and Trenton, and although close geographically, they're very different places. Can you talk a bit about the concept of the other in your novel?
I think most of my books, in fact, I think probably all of my books, deal with this idea of who is the other, who in our lives. And I don't just mean, nationally, of course, I mean partly that, but I don't just mean that. I also mean who in our neighborhood, who on our street, who in our family do we consider to be unlovable, to be one of those people, that person. Well, I'm not gonna, I don't want anything to do with them because they're those people. Who is that in our lives, whether it's, the alcoholic or the person of a different color or the person of a different religion. And in this novel, what I'm looking at, there are two women in the novel, right? So there's Angela, who's a very privileged woman from leafy and prosperous Princeton, who seemingly has most everything she wants or should want. And then there's Sister Eileen, this Catholic nun who lives very simply among the marginalized or the materially poor in Trenton and runs a food pantry. And so the novel is about how both of those people can be considered the other from one perspective or the other, right? Some people have said, oh, I loved her, but I didn't like her, or I liked her, but I didn't like the other one. Everybody's got an opinion as to who the unlovable person is, right? And that's kind of the point, because what I'm trying to explore in this novel is the difference between love being used as a reward for good behavior, as in, oh, you're such a great person, I just love them. What a good boy, the way I talk to my dog, right? What a good boy, I just love you, right? But what about love used as a tool for mutual healing? What about a tool, love used as a transformational tool? And that's when you start applying, it's the application of love to someone challenging, to someone difficult. And sometimes that challenging, difficult person is us. And sometimes we need the application of that love, not only from the other, but also from the self. That there are, and in this case, both of these women, there is something inside them that they, even if they don't admit it, even if they don't necessarily see it right off, that they feel is fundamentally unlovable. And it isn't until the relationship between the two of them, which is a difficult relationship. Angela is one of those people, in that Gatsby way of being kind of careless with other people and reckless, because she's so driven by the passion that she thinks will fulfill her. She becomes quite reckless. And there's a line in the book about her being careless with all the fragile things that she holds, the hearts of other people, really. And because her drive for passion leads her to make some mistakes that have fairly tragic results, she becomes a real challenge for Sister Eileen to love in that way. So both of them become, it's interesting, I'm writing about a Catholic nun. I'm not Catholic. I don't even know if I'm Christian. But that's the language I'm using in this book. So they become sort of the angel that each wrestles with, in that sort of wrestling with the angel way in the Bible. I think it's only when we wrestle with that kind of angel that we get bent into forms, into shapes we might not otherwise find ourselves in. And those shapes lead to healing, which is, of course, most important when it heals both of the parties involved. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Good.
And my next question is, I think you've answered it a little bit, but just speaking of Angela, that some people or some readers may not find her to be a particularly likable character, but you have said that you like her since you made her up. Can you share some insight?
I like her a lot.
Yeah, okay.
I love her passion. I love her dedication to living the fullest life that she can live. I love her for not settling. Is she messy? Oh, hell yes, she's incredibly messy. But I have to, this idea of the likable character, I think this is something that comes up recently in literature. That characters have to be likable. I'm far less interested in likable characters than I am in characters who fascinate me, who provoke a response in me in some way. I don't think that you could say Raskolnikov is a particularly likable character. It might be argued that Madame Bovary is not a likable character, right? Or even that Anya Karenina is, perhaps the greatest, novel there is not a likable character. but they're fascinating. You can't take your eyes off them. They're interesting people. They're people full of life and spark and passion. And that to me is that should be what carries the reader through. Because if we only write about likable characters, then aren't we writing about characters that don't make us think in any particular way, or don't call upon the exercise of empathy in any way?
Absolutely. And I think just when you're talking about that, I think of the main character in The Empty Room. And, it wasn't that I did or didn't like her, but she really was compelling to follow her path. And
even if you just wanted to shake her sometimes and say, stop doing that.
And I did. I said that.
Me too.
Yeah. So I'm just going to take a break just to say that in a few moments, we'll be taking your questions. And so please, if you have a question for Lauren, please put it in the Q&A link and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. But before that, I have another question. Just like Angela, Sister Eileen, who runs the food pantry, she is really searching for something that is missing in her life. So can you talk a little bit about her struggle and how that involves Angela?
Well, her struggle is really what they call the silence of God, which is a condition that happens apparently to people of deep faith when they feel that their relationship with whatever they consider to be sacred, God, in this case, simplest word, it has been severed, that there is nothing there, that their yearnings, their prayers are going nowhere, just silence is coming back. It's an excruciating position to be in. I suspect with Sister Eileen, the reason that she is experiencing the silence of God is because there is something in her that she is keeping closed off from that love, which is coming to her without stopping. It's coming to her constantly. It is ceaselessly approaching her. But because there's something that she has done that she feels has made herself unlovable, that she has put up a barricade to that. So it's in learning to love someone else, she is in fact confronting and building a relationship with the unlovable that is within herself. And so that's why I think relationship is so important in this book. Right? That none of these people are healing themselves in a vacuum. They're all healing themselves in relationship to other people. That's the language that the sacred, whatever that may be, the sacred takes to talk to each of these people.
Great, thank you. I was hoping that you might be able to share with our audience some of the research you did for the novel. In the acknowledgements, you thank the sisters of the St. Raphaela
Retreat House.
Retreat Center.
Well, I have a very dear friend. Years ago, when I was going through a particularly bleak period, a friend of mine, both my brothers committed suicide as a result of addiction and alcoholism, which is what the Grimoire of Kensington Market is about. And I was in a really bleak place, and a friend of mine said, you should go talk to Sister Rita. And I said, Sister Rita, I'm not Catholic. I mean, why would I talk to a nun? And she said, oh, Sister Rita's not going to care whether you're Catholic or not. She's really good at sort of figuring out what's going on in your life. So in desperation, I did. And she's become, really what they call in Ireland, an Amankara, a soul friend, an incredibly wise woman. And she's the person to whom the book is dedicated. So when I was starting to think about this book, I said to her, so nuns, I don't have a Catholic upbringing. I don't know anything about you guys except, that I love you and I love a couple of other women I've met. Any chance of me going and hanging out with the nuns for a while? So she got me into this retreat house that the nuns run in Pennsylvania. So I was able to go and live with them and live as they live. And that was the deal, right? I'm not going to go and be a guest in this retreat house. I'm going to do what you do because I want to know. And I'm telling you, these women work like you would not believe. And we're talking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they're cleaning toilets and making beds, and they're scrubbing pots, and and these are not young women. I mean, most nuns these days are not in their 20s, right? These are not young women. I was exhausted by 10 o'clock in the morning. And we have to go till 10 o'clock at night. So it was a fascinating experience, not just because I saw the level of service that they do, but this thing happened. I was in the kitchen one night and we're all cleaning these pots. And as you can tell, I'm a bit of a yacker. And there was a lot of silence in there. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know if I said something wrong. Is something happening? And finally, I said to one of the sisters, so what's going through your mind while you're doing this? And she said, well, we're praying, Lauren. Right? We pray, we put our prayer into the work so that everything that results from the work can bring a level of peace to the people who benefit from it. So the pots are cleaned with prayer, the soup is cooked with prayer, the beds are made with prayer, so that it's very Buddhist, right? I mean, it's this idea of putting this kind of sort of energy, this prayerful energy into everything they do. And I thought, that moment by moment awareness of the other, it changed the way I was looking at the book. It changed the focus of the book from something that was originally going to be a little more political to this relationship between two people, because of what I learned from them. They're still my friends. I'm really honored to know them.
That sounds like a fascinating retreat. At this point, I'd like to invite you to read from your book, if you would.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So I'm just going to read a little snack roll, and this is from the point of view of Sister Eileen, as it happens. Sister Eileen stood at the kitchen counter, chopping onions. Onion skin, she thought. That's what we used to call airmail letter paper. Her great aunt Kate, something of a family rebel, way off in County Sligo, wrote letters on such paper. She wrote about warriors and druids, banshees, Balor of the evil eye, and the Cailleach, a wild and willful female goddess who made the stones and storms. Eileen's mother would scan the letters with a snort of derision and toss them in the trash, muttering about godless pagans. Eileen, however, would rescue them, ferret them away, and read them. She found no sacrilege in the old tales and the spirits of sky and earth, not then and not now. What was all the world and everything in it, after all, except a metaphor for God, who spoke in the language of whomever God sought? And didn't God seek us all? But no one wrote letters any longer, did they? They texted. Texts, yes. There was Angela's face floating in front of her. Angela texting Karsten, even though he was only a few yards away, working in the same once blasted piece of land. Karsten texting her back, and then the smile, the giggle, and the blush. Angela, there was a force of nature. Eileen scraped the onions into the pot and with a dab of olive oil and set to chopping the carrots and celery. A soup needed a good base, something homey and solid, seemingly plain, but without which it would be nothing but thin gruel. Cooking was so simple and such a prayer. She stirred the soup clockwise, for that brought good things, and she prayed so that put God into the food. A little bit of kitchen witchery there. Keeping Angela in mind, she stirred and prayed that God's plan for the good of all might be made reality. Unsure God was even listening. How long had it been since she'd felt the actual presence? Months? Certainly. Years? Yes. Now all she felt was the terrible, agonizing silence. A woman could let tears drop into the soup and salt it, but that might bring sorrow to those who ate it. She felt a pang of guilt for introducing Angela and Karsten, and sent that, along with a pinch of salt, into the soup, and so to God. Guilt was not useful. It was too self-absorbed. Well, whatever happened now was in the hands of the God she trusted. Even now, even so.
Thank you. Sheila, I'm wondering if there are any questions from the audience that we could share at this time.
There is, yeah. So one of the first ones one of our audience members have asked is, you had talked about how you settled on the title Even So, but within other drafts, was there ever any other title you had considered?
You know, there actually wasn't, and this is sort of the first time that that's happened. I really didn't have, you know, the sisters. I didn't know. I didn't really have a title for this one. Other novels I've had, I don't know how many titles for. And in fact, the first novel I wrote was called The Stubborn Season, and I think the original title I had for that was The Whited Sepulchre. And the problem was I really couldn't say sepulchre. I thought, this is going to be really problematic if I first of all, I wasn't sure if people would get the reference. It's again a biblical reference. I wasn't sure if people would get it, but I also didn't think that I could pronounce it very well, so I had to give up on that one. But this one seems sort of obvious, I think.
Michaela, do you have another one?
Yeah, so with so many novels under your belt, do you feel more immersed as you write each new one?
Immersed. Well, you know, obsessed, probably, yes. I don't think any more so. I will tell you that every novel you write, at least that I write, I assume is going to be the one for which I'm discovered to be the fraud that I feel I am. Every single book, I assume, is going to be the end of my career. And every single book about, you know, I would say maybe, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of the way through, I walk into the kitchen and go, to my husband, this is it. I don't know what I was thinking of. I can't do this. I'm a terrible writer. It's all a mess. And he just looks at me and goes, oh, you're there, are you? And I know it's not like I've never been here before. This is completely different. I don't know what you're talking about. And he just smiles and wanders off. What's interesting is I have a friend, his name is Robert Olin Butler. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning novelist, an amazing fellow. And he, in one of his books, I can't remember which one it is, one of his nonfiction books, it might be From Where You Dream, which is a very good writing book. He talks about this, going in and saying to his wife, you know, I'm a fraud, I'm a failure, it's all dismal, it's all pointless. Why am I doing this? It's a useless way to spend your life. And she looks at him and goes, oh, you're there. Right. So I was so relieved by that, because I thought, if even a Pulitzer Prize winner can feel like this with every book, you know, I guess it's okay. I think the trick is to recognize that, you know, every book is like starting anew. It's starting, unless you're writing sort of a Harlequin romance, you know, which is a very, very formulaic sort of work. But in every work of literary fiction, it really is like starting all over again from scratch, because every book has its own language, its own structure, its own set of symbols and metaphors. It's never like the one before it. And you always, I think, at least I always feel incredible doubt about anything that I'm writing. And it generally takes 2 or 3 years after it's been published, and I'll pick it up and read it and go, you know, or look at a couple of pages and go, well, you know, that's not actually that bad.
I'm surprised it takes you that long. It doesn't take
sometimes you don't want to look too close, you know,
yes.
especially at this point, you know, when you're doing, you know, PR for the book and stuff, because if you look at it and you start seeing where there are things you would have changed or rewritten, it's like, oh, no, don't do that. Don't go there. Right. Not now. Just get through it.
Great. Thank you. Michaela, is there another question?
Yeah, so one of our attendees has said, I love your approach to creating an interesting character. I'm just curious, what would you consider to be your literary influences? What do you enjoy reading?
Oh, gosh. Well, let me tell you, I mean, it's so much. I mean, I think James Agee's book, Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, which is a really difficult book. In a lot of ways, not the least of which is he was drunk while he was writing part of it, which I see clearly as an adult. But I started that book when I was sort of a mid-teenager, just it blew my mind away. And I wanted so desperately to be a writer after that. But more recently, in fact, there's a couple of books that I've read recently that have floored me. One is Jenny Erpenbeck's, I think it's called The End of Days. She's a German writer. And she writes, it's a story of a woman's life who it's so interesting. It's one of the few books I've read recently that isn't bound to be a film. It couldn't be, but she, you know, at first she dies as an infant, and then it goes on, and in the next bit, you know, she dies as a teenager, and in the next bit she dies and it shows you what would have happened and what has happened in each different permutation of those possible. It's brilliant. brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I just amazing. The other book I just finished, there's a book, a guy named Brad Kessler, who lives in Vermont, and he's just got a new book out called North, which is about a woman Somali refugee, a Muslim, who takes refuge, a sanctuary in a monastery in upstate New York, which is actually where Brad lives with a bunch of goats. He leads a pastoral life, raises goats. His first book was called Goat Song, which is about the pastoral life, stunningly beautiful. Although the chapter on a billy goat in rut, they are disgusting creatures. And really, if you want to skip that chapter, I would kind of recommend it. But the other book he's written is called Birds in Fall, and it's set in Nova Scotia. It's about a plane that drops out of the sky. It's a meditation on mortality and surviving loss and on grief, and is, with hands down, one of the most beautiful books I have read in years. And there's something about that. I wish I could write like he writes, because there's this, whereas with Irvin Beck, I wish I could plot the way she plots. With Kessler, I wish I could capture those crystal moments, that sort of crystalline prose. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful, and it never seems like he's trying to be writerly. Some books, like, they're all kinds of lyric, mouthfeel poetry stuff, and you can see the author all over it. This isn't like that. It's just naturally flows beautifully. So highly, highly recommended. Birds in Flight.
Okay, we're all madly writing these things down.
Good, as you should be.
I just have one last question before our time is done. Throughout the pandemic, your blog, which can be found on Lauren's website as well as on Goodreads, shared some of the thoughts on the pandemic and lockdown. Mm-hmm. And one of the posts said, "I don't seem able to write." And earlier I mentioned a time when you said you write to make sense of the world. And so I wondered if your inability to write was related at all to how crazy and how, it isn't possible really to make sense of the world right now. And yeah, go ahead.
Were you finished, Catherine? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just
going to say, and were you trying to write Even So during that time?
Oh no, Even So was finished. In fact, Even So was supposed to come out just after the pandemic went into lockdown, and they postponed it. So no, I wrote Even So a while back, and I haven't been able to write much. And I think part of it is I don't know what feels important right now. I'm not. I truly believe that nonfiction is a happening thing. You write it, it's happening right now. For me, fiction needs time to compost. You need some space between you and whatever the event is. So I'm not about to start writing about the pandemic. I'm not about to. I'm not. I don't know what it is yet. I don't know what it is. It hasn't filtered down. I've lost family members. I've lost friends to this disease. I don't know what it feels like yet. And I'm one of those people who I like to be alone anyways. So that hasn't been a real hardship for me. Also because I have a wonderful husband and that dog. So I'm not really alone. And I don't have to worry about money, which is an obscene privilege, it feels like at this time. But I feel stuck because I feel like I don't have any vision right now. Everything seems to be happening right in front of me. So I'm thinking once the PR for this book dies down, and of course it will, I think I'm just going to have to not look at news or TV or anything for a period of time so that I can see. So I've got to sort of stop looking so that I can see a little further, if that makes any sense. So it's I have to admit, it's been depressing not to be able to write, because it's about the only thing I do that makes a lot of sense to me. And so not having that voice right now feels pretty stressful. But I also, just like when I walk into the kitchen and say, my husband will look at me and go, oh, yeah, you're there, right? So I understand intellectually that this is another one of those, oh, you're there moments. And I'm just going to have a little faith that we'll get through.
Okay, well, I sure hope you find that faith and get back to writing, because
Thank you.
I just so love your books, and I'm so thankful that you were able to join us tonight. And
very grateful to be here.
oh, well, it's been a thrill for me to be able to have you here, and I certainly hope we can have you back again.
You just call me. I'll be on the Zoom.
Okay, I totally get that.
Thanks so much, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Grateful. Take care.
Thank you.